The enemy sniper pressed his eye to the glass, exhaled, and whispered to the man beside him. The American colonel walks like he owns this valley. In 90 seconds, he will own a grave. He had already chosen the spot where Colonel James Walker would fall. He had watched for days. He knew the man's habits, his routes, his arrogance. And he smiled because no one on that ridge had any idea he existed. No one but a 23-year-old rookie nobody believed in. Before we go further, if you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel and follow this story all the way to the end and comment the city you are watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. Now let us begin. Nobody in the unit thought Olivia Carter belonged behind that scope. They didn't say it to her face. Soldiers rarely do, but she heard it anyway in the way conversations died when she walked into the tent, in the little pause before a veteran handed her a rangefinder, in the way Staff Sergeant Marcus Reed always double-checked her numbers, even when her numbers were perfect. Especially when her numbers were perfect. "You ran the dope on that again," Marcus asked her one morning, squinting at her notebook. "3 times, Olivia said. And it was right all 3 times. Marcus grunted. It was the kind of grunt that meant we'll see. He was 41 years old with 14 years in the service and enough confirmed missions that he never had to raise his voice to be believed. When Marcus spoke, men listened. When Olivia spoke, men waited to hear what Marcus thought first. She had learned not to fight it. Fighting it only made it louder. "You know what your problem is, Carter," Marcus said, folding his arms. "You're going to tell me anyway. You treat this like math class." He tapped the side of his own head. "Out here, the wind doesn't care about your equations. The enemy doesn't wait for you to finish carrying the 2. Combat isn't a formula." Olivia closed her notebook slowly. "Then why do we teach the formula?" Marcus opened his mouth. Then he closed it again because he didn't have a clean answer, and he hated not having a clean answer. He walked off muttering something about rookies, and Olivia watched him go, and she said nothing. That was the thing about Olivia Carter. She almost never argued. The other snipers took her silence for weakness, for a lack of confidence, for a girl who was in over her head and too proud to admit it. But her silence wasn't weakness. Her silence was a decision. She had figured out a long time ago that people who talk constantly stop paying attention to the world. And a sniper who stops paying attention to the world is a sniper who gets people killed. So she watched, and she listened, and she waited. They called her the calculator. It was not meant as a compliment. She took it as one anyway. She had earned the highest marksmanship scores in her training class. Not the highest for a woman. The highest, period. She had a memory for numbers that unsettled her instructors, an ability to hold wind speed, elevation, humidity, and target lead in her head all at once the way other people held a grocery list. But scores were scores. Range time was range time. And every man on that team knew the ugly truth that separated her from them, the truth nobody ever said out loud until Marcus finally said it. "You've never been shot at, Carter." They were driving up into the mountains when he said it, the vehicle rattling over a road that barely deserved the name. The mission was simple on paper. A surveillance post overlooking a supply route the enemy had been using to move weapons through the region. Watch, report, wait, nothing more. "That's not a knock on you," Marcus went on, though it absolutely was a knock on her. "It's just a fact. There's a difference between a person who can shoot and a person who can shoot when somebody is trying to kill them. You don't know which one you are yet. Neither do I." Olivia stared out at the passing ridgelines. "You're saying I might freeze." "I'm saying nobody knows what they'll do until the moment comes." Marcus shrugged. "I've seen it happen to men twice your age. Big men, loud men. The first time real rounds come at them, something in the head just locks up. And you can't train that out of a person. You either have it or you don't. And you think I don't." "I think," what Marcus said carefully, "that I'd feel a lot better if I knew." Olivia let that sit. She could have told him about the thousands of dry fire repetitions she'd done in the dark. She could have told him about the nights she lay awake running failure scenarios in her head until her heart rate learned to stay flat through all of them. She could have told him that she had spent her entire life being underestimated and that she had learned to use it like a tool. But she didn't say any of that. She just said, "We'll find out when we find out." Marcus almost smiled. Almost. They reached the observation post as the light was going gold and long across the valley. The position was good. High ground, decent concealment, a clean view of the supply route below, and the cluster of abandoned buildings that had once been a village on the far side. Olivia settled into her spot with a patience that unnerved Marcus more than any bragging would have. She adjusted, checked, adjusted again, and then went completely still. You planning to blink at some point? Marcus asked. When it's useful, she said. For hours, she studied the landscape. She wasn't looking at it the way a tourist looks at a view. She was reading it. The way the dust lifted and settled told her about the wind at different distances. The way the shadows crawled told her about the time and the sun and the angles that would soon matter. She built a map in her mind layer by layer until she could have described that valley in the dark. And somewhere in the second hour, something started bothering her. She couldn't name it at first. That was the worst part. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a movement she could point to. It was an absence, a wrongness, a note that didn't belong in the song. Marcus, she said quietly, the village. What do you see? Marcus lifted his own optic and scanned the ruins. Empty buildings, rubble, same as an hour ago. Look at the third structure from the left, the one with the collapsed roof. He looked. Okay. There's a window on the second floor, dark, deep. So there are birds on every ledge in that village except that one. Marcus lowered his optic and gave her a flat look. Birds. Birds don't sit near things that scare them, Olivia said. Every other perch has birds. That one's been empty the whole time we've been here. Carter. Marcus rubbed his face. You're reading a novel into a bird taking a day off. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're inventing threats because you want there to be a threat. You want the big moment. Everybody does their first time out. Olivia didn't answer. She just kept watching the window. There's nothing there, Marcus said. Maybe she said, but she didn't look away. Everyone else on that team saw empty buildings. Olivia saw a hole in the world where something was hiding, holding very still, waiting for the sky to give it a reason to sit up. She couldn't prove it. She couldn't even fully explain it, but the feeling had teeth and it would not let go of her. Then the radio crackled and everything changed. All positions be advised. The voice belonged to their platoon net. Actual is inbound to your location for a personal inspection. ETA 15 mics. Colonel Walker wants eyes on the route himself. Marcus straightened up like a man who'd just heard good news. Now that, he said, is a soldier's soldier. Walker's coming here, Olivia asked. Personally, that's how he is. Doesn't send other people to look at things he can look at himself. Marcus said it with real admiration, the kind veterans reserved for the rare officer who had earned it. 26 years in, 2 wars, that man has walked into more bad places than you've had hot meals, Carter, and he's still standing. You know why? Because he trusts his gut. When everybody else is running the numbers, Walker moves. And moving is what keeps you alive out here. Olivia thought about the empty window and said nothing. 15 minutes later, Colonel James Walker arrived at the observation post the way he arrived everywhere, like a man who had made peace with the possibility of dying and had therefore decided to stop being afraid of it. He was tall gray at the temples, with a face that had been carved by sun and hard decisions. He clasped Marcus by the shoulder like an old friend because they were old friends, and he barely glanced at Olivia. This your shooter? Walker asked. One of them, sir, Marcus said. Carter, fresh out of the pipeline. Good scores. Good scores. Walker said it the way a man says a word in a language he doesn't respect. Not unkind, just unimpressed. Scores don't mean much up here, Sergeant. You'll learn. Yes, sir, Olivia said. Walker was already moving past her, lifting a pair of binoculars to study the valley. He examined the supply route, the terrain, the far ridge. And then his eyes settled on the very thing Olivia had feared he would notice. That ridge line, Walker said, pointing toward a spur of high ground near the abandoned village. From up there, I'd have a full view of the road all the way to the pass. I can't see the last kilometer from this position. From that ridge, I could. Good call, sir, Marcus said. Olivia's stomach dropped. Because she had already traced that road in her head, she had already run the geometry, and the geometry was a nightmare. Sir, she said. Walker didn't turn. Colonel Walker, sir, she said a little louder. I'd advise against moving to that ridge. Now he turned, slowly. There was nothing hostile in his expression, and somehow that made it worse. It was the patient, faintly amused look of a man being addressed by a child. And why is that, Sergeant? The approach to that ridge crosses open ground, Olivia said, and the angle from that ridge back toward the village puts you in a direct line with the third structure from the left. If there's a shooter in that structure moving to the ridge, walks you straight into his firing lane. Walker glanced toward the village. Is there a shooter in that structure? Olivia hesitated, just for a heartbeat, but a heartbeat is a long time when a colonel is watching you. I can't confirm it, sir. You can't confirm it? Walker nodded slowly. So what you're telling me is that you have a feeling. I'm telling you the birds. Walker actually laughed, though not cruelly. He looked at Marcus. She reads the birds. Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable. She's thorough, sir. Thorough is good, Walker said. Thorough keeps you alive on the range. But out here, Sergeant Carter, if I stopped moving every time a young soldier had a bad feeling about a bird, I'd never leave the wire. I've been doing this since before you could walk, and I'm telling you that ridge is the right position, and I'm going to take it. He turned back toward the valley, and that should have been the end of it. An officer had decided, a rookie had been overruled. The chain of command had done what the chain of command does. But Olivia didn't move back to her post. She moved forward. Sir. Her voice was quieter now, and that quiet made both men look at her. With respect, I'm not asking you to stop moving. I'm asking you to let me clear that structure first. Give me 5 minutes. Let me watch that window with everything I've got. If it's empty, you take your ridge, and I'll never mention a bird to you again. If it's not empty, I just kept you off a kill line for the cost of 5 minutes. There was a long silence. Marcus was staring at her like he'd never seen her before, and in a way he hadn't. This wasn't the quiet calculator who never argued. This was something else, something that had been sitting underneath the quiet the whole time. Walker studied her. For the first time, the amusement in his eyes flickered, replaced by something closer to genuine attention. 5 minutes, he said. And when your window comes up empty, Sergeant, you're going to look me in the eye and admit that instinct without evidence is how young snipers get people killed. Deal. Deal, sir, Olivia said. She was already back behind her scope before he finished the sentence. The window filled her whole world. Dark, deep, empty in the way a mouth is empty right before it speaks. She slowed her breathing. She let her heartbeat drop into her boots. She waited for the thing she couldn't see to make the one small mistake that every hidden thing eventually makes. 4 minutes, Walker said behind her, checking his watch. Olivia didn't hear him. Talk to me, Carter, Marcus murmured, and there was no mockery in it now. He had known her long enough to know that whatever this was, she believed it all the way down. What do you see? Nothing yet. 3 minutes, Walker said. Nothing. The window stayed dark. The wind stirred the dust in the valley. A bird landed on a ledge 2 buildings over, and Olivia's mind noted it and set it aside. Come on, she thought, come on. Show me I'm not crazy, or show me I am, and let this man take his ridge and let me learn my lesson. 2 minutes, Walker said, and there was a note in his voice, now that hadn't been there before. A note that said, I told you so, was already forming on his tongue. And then it happened. Inside the dark window, something moved. It was almost nothing. A shift of shadow deep in the black, so subtle that 100 snipers could have watched that window for 100 hours and never seen it. But Olivia was not 100 snipers. Olivia had been staring at that exact rectangle of darkness for 2 hours with a feeling in her gut like a stone, and when the shadow moved, her whole body went cold and clear at once. Contact, she breathed. What? Marcus snapped up his optic. 3rd structure, 2nd floor. There's a man in that window. Olivia's voice was flat and fast. He just shifted his position. He's prone. He's got a long gun. Walker was suddenly right behind her. Confirm it. I'm trying to, and then the thing in the window did the one thing that took the last of Olivia's doubt and burned it to ash. A tiny point of light winked in the darkness. A flash of reflection. The sun catching a lens or a scope or arranging optic. Metal where no metal should be. Confirmed, she said. Glass. He's got glass on us. He's an aimed threat. The temperature on that observation post seemed to drop 10 degrees. He's ranging, Olivia said, her mind racing ahead of her mouth. He's not looking at us. His angle's wrong for us. He's looking at... And her blood ran to ice because she already knew the answer before she finished the sentence. He's looking at the ridge, sir. He's already zeroed on the ridge. He's not waiting for a target of opportunity. He's been set up on that ridgeline the whole time because he knew somebody with rank would eventually want that view. Walker stood very still because he understood in that instant exactly what he had almost done. 2 minutes earlier, he had been 30 seconds from ordering his security element to move him up onto that ridge. He would have walked out across the open ground. He would have climbed to the position with the perfect view, and he would have set himself down, framed like a photograph, directly in the crosshairs of a man who had been waiting days for a colonel to do exactly that. The birds. She had read it in the birds. Sergeant Reed, Walker said, and his voice had changed completely. Gone was the amused veteran. This was the commander now. Get on the net. Nobody moves toward that ridge. Nobody exposes to that structure. I want everyone in cover right now. Quiet. Yes, sir. Walker crouched down beside Olivia, low out of the sniper's line. And when he spoke to her again, there was something in his voice that she had not expected to hear from him. Not that day. Maybe not ever. I owe you an apology, he said quietly, and I do not say that often. Later, sir, Olivia said, because her eye was still on the window and her mind was already 3 moves ahead. We have a problem. Talk. He's on us now. Her mouth had gone dry. The moment your security element started moving people into cover, something changed. He saw the reaction. He knows he's been spotted. And a shooter who knows he's blown doesn't just pack up and go home. He takes the best target he can get before he loses the chance. Walker's jaw tightened. How long do we have? I don't know. Olivia's hands were completely steady, which was strange because everything inside her was screaming. But he's shifting. He's coming off the ridge angle. He's traversing. She swallowed. Sir, he's swinging toward us. Nobody spoke. He can't have a clean shot on our position, Marcus said low and urgent. We're in defilade. There's no way he... There's a gap, Olivia said. There's a gap in our cover on the left side, about 18 inches. I saw it when we set up. I meant to mention it. Her voice cracked just slightly on the last word, and it was the only crack she would allow herself. He's traversing toward that gap, and the colonel is standing on the wrong side of it. Walker looked down at himself. He was crouched, yes, but his shoulder, his upper body cut across exactly the line she was describing. If the sniper found that 18-inch gap, Walker was the thing on the other side of it. Move, sir, Marcus said, reaching for him. Get down, get... No. Olivia's voice cut across both of them like a wire. Don't move. If you move now, you cross the open part of the gap on your way down, and you give him the shot you're trying to avoid. Sir, I need you to hold exactly still, exactly where you are. Do you understand me? It was on its face an insane thing to say. A 23-year-old rookie ordering a full colonel to freeze in place while an enemy sniper hunted for a lane to kill him. Every instinct in Walker's body, 26 years of instinct, screamed at him to move, to get low, to do something. And instead he looked at the young woman who had read a threat in the behavior of birds and been right, and he made the hardest decision of his career. He held still. I'm holding, he said. What's your plan, Sergeant? Olivia's eye never left the scope. In the dark window, the shape had shifted fully now, and she could see the barrel of the rifle for the first time, a thin, dark line, easing toward the gap in her cover, toward the man beside her, toward the colonel who had laughed at her about the birds and was now trusting her with his life. My plan, Olivia said softly, is to take the shot before he does. Marcus went rigid. Carter, that's 800 meters, through this wind, against a target in a window and shadow with maybe 6 inches of him exposed. That's not a shot. That's a prayer. It's not a prayer, Olivia said. It's a number. Her thumb moved to her elevation turret. Her mind was already spinning the math she had been building for 2 hours, the wind at 300 meters, the wind at 600, the swirl she'd read off the dust near the village, the temperature, the angle, the drop. She had been doing this problem in her head unconsciously since the moment she first looked at that window. She just hadn't known she'd need the answer. You miss, Marcus said. And he knows exactly where we are, and he does not miss the colonel. You understand what you're... I understand, Olivia said. Behind her, Walker held perfectly still, a statue balanced on the edge of his own mortality, and he said the only thing left to say. I trust you, Sergeant Carter. 4 words from a man who 20 minutes earlier would not have trusted her to pick a good spot for lunch. Olivia let out a slow breath and let it carry the last of her doubt out with it. The wind gusted. She waited. In her mind, the numbers were not frozen values on a page. They were living, breathing things shifting with every second, and she rode them the way a sailor rides a swell, feeling for the moment when the sea would go quiet enough. The rifle in the far window slid another inch toward the gap. She had seconds, maybe less. "Talk to me," Marcus whispered. "Wind's dropping," she said. "Give me a lull." "Carter, give me a lull." The dust in the valley, which had been streaming sideways, began to settle. The song of the wind changed its pitch. Olivia felt it more than saw it, that half second of stillness, that the mountains offer up maybe once a minute and never announce. And in that stillness, the enemy sniper found his gap. His rifle stopped moving. It settled. It aimed, straight at Colonel James Walker. Olivia Carter's whole life had been leading to the next quarter of a second, and she knew it, and she was not afraid, and she did not hesitate. She began to take up the slack in the trigger. And that is where the breath of an entire valley stopped, because whatever happened in the next moment, whether the rookie nobody believed in was about to make sniper history or about to get a colonel killed, was going to be decided not by luck, not by fate, but by a number she had carried in her head for 2 hours and told to no one. The wind held, her finger moved, and Colonel Walker, frozen in place, staring at the young woman who held his life in the pad of one steady fingertip, finally understood the thing Marcus had tried to explain to her in the truck. There was a difference between a person who could shoot and a person who could shoot when it mattered. He had assumed he knew which one she was. He had been wrong about that too. "Steady," Olivia breathed to herself, to the rifle, to the wind, to the whole trembling world. And she began to squeeze. She squeezed. The rifle spoke, and the sound of it rolled out across the valley like something falling off the edge of the world. Olivia felt the recoil push into her shoulder, and she was already back on the glacier, already hunting for the result, because a sniper who admires her own shot is a sniper who misses her next one. For one endless second, nothing happened. The rifle in the far window did not fire back. It did not adjust. It did not do anything at all. And then slowly the thin, dark line of the enemy barrel dropped. It slid down and to the side and came to rest at an angle no living man would ever choose to hold his weapon. "He's down," Olivia said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, very far away. "The threat is down." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Colonel Walker was still frozen exactly where she'd told him to freeze. One knee bent, his weight balanced on the edge of a decision that had already been made for him. "Say again," Marcus said. "Enemy sniper is down." Olivia's finger came off the trigger, and only then did she notice how steady it had been, how it hadn't trembled once, and how it was starting to tremble now that the work was finished. "I'm watching the window. No movement, no secondary. He's not getting back up." Walker let out a breath he had been holding for what felt like a year. He lowered himself the rest of the way to the ground, slow and careful, and when he was fully in cover, he stayed there for a moment, his palm flat against the dirt, as if he needed to feel something solid underneath him. "Reed," he said, "get me confirmation. I want eyes on that structure. I want to know that man is what she says he is, and I want to know he was alone." "Yes, sir," Marcus said, and his voice cracked on the second word. For a full minute, the only sound was the wind coming back up over the ridge, indifferent, as if it had not just held its breath long enough for a 23-year-old to thread a bullet through a gap the size of a paperback. Olivia stayed on the glass. She did not celebrate. She did not shake. She simply watched because watching was the job, and the job was not over until someone with more rank than her said it was over. Then the radio came alive. "Overwatch, this is the security element. We have movement in the village north side. Repeat, we have movement. 2, possibly 3 individuals moving toward the third structure." Marcus's head snapped up. He wasn't alone. He wasn't alone, Olivia agreed, and her stomach turned over because of course he wasn't alone. A shooter who had been camped on that ridgeline for days did not carry his own water and food and ammunition up the mountain by himself. Somebody had helped him. Somebody was still down there. "Talk to me, Carter," Walker said. He had become, in the space of 5 minutes, a man who wanted to hear what she saw before he decided anything. "What are we looking at?" Olivia traced the movement in her scope. 3 figures, low, fast moving, with the kind of discipline that told her these were not villagers who had wandered in for firewood. They're moving on his position. They're either going to recover his body or recover his equipment, or both. And they're armed. "Threat to us? Not yet." They don't have our range. They don't have our angle. She paused. But sir, they're going to reach that structure in about 90 seconds. And when they get there and find their man dead with a hole punched through 800 meters of wind, they're going to know exactly what happened. And they're going to start looking for the shooter who did it. Walker was quiet for a beat. Meaning they start looking for us. Meaning they start looking for us. Marcus was already moving, checking the security element's positions, reading the ground. We can be off this hill in 10 minutes. Displace brake, contact egress south. They'll never. No, Walker said. Marcus stopped. Sir, that sniper was tracking command movements. Walker's voice had gone hard and low. He didn't set up on that ridge to take a shot at whoever walked by. He was hunting rank. He was hunting me specifically, or somebody like me. That means somebody fed him a schedule. Somebody down there knows when our officers move and where. And I am not walking off this mountain and leaving that network intact so they can set up the same ambush for the next colonel who isn't lucky enough to have a shooter who reads birds. Nobody said anything to that. Those 3 men, Walker went on, are going to lead us to something. A quiche, a comms node, a handler. I want to know where they go. Carter, you keep them in your scope. You do not fire unless they become a direct threat to this position. We watch, we report, we wait. And when the drone assets I'm about to call in have eyes on the whole picture, we'll know exactly how deep this thing runs. Yes, sir, Olivia said and settled deeper into her position. The next 20 minutes were the longest of her life, longer even than the 2 hours she'd spent staring at a dark window. She tracked the 3 figures as they reached the structure. She watched them go still when they found their man. She watched one of them stagger back out into the open, and even at that distance, even through the shimmer of the heat, she could read the body language of a man who has just discovered that his friend is dead and that death came from somewhere he cannot see. They found him, she reported. One of them's coming apart. The other 2 are pulling him back inside. She stopped. They're stripping the position, taking the rifle, taking a bag, taking something out of the wall. There's a cavity in the wall behind where he was set up. There's gear in it. That's your cache, Walker murmured. Reed, are those drone assets up yet? 2 mics out, sir. 2 minutes, Walker repeated, and there was frustration in it, because 2 minutes is nothing and everything all at once. Carter, keep them talking to me. If they move before we have eyes overhead, we lose the thread. And here was where the calculator did something the veterans on that team would talk about for years afterward, in the quiet way soldiers talk about the moments that don't fit into any report. Because Olivia, without being told, had already been reading the 3 men the way she read birds, the way she read dust, and she had already noticed the thing that mattered. They're not going to run south to the pass, she said. Why not? Because the man who's carrying the cash bag keeps looking east every few seconds. He's not looking at his friends. He's not looking back at us. He's looking at a low saddle in the ridge to the east past the last building. She narrowed her focus. That's their exfil. That's where they came from, and that's where they're going back to. And whatever's on the other side of that saddle is worth more to them than getting away clean because they're loading up heavy instead of running light. Walker keyed his radio. All assets be advised. Priority exfil route for these individuals is the eastern saddle grid to follow. Get the drone eyes on the far side of that saddle, not on the village. The village is a graveyard. The far side of that saddle is where the network lives. Rerouting now, sir. It was, Marcus would later admit, the single smartest read he'd seen from a sniper in 14 years, and it had come from a rookie who'd never been shot at until 40 minutes ago. Olivia hadn't just made an impossible shot. She'd looked at 3 grieving, panicking men through a scope and told a colonel where their command lived based on nothing but which direction one of them kept glancing while he worked. The drone came up. The picture came clear. And on the far side of the eastern saddle, tucked into a fold of ground that no ground observer could ever have seen, there was a compound. Vehicles, antennas, a dozen figures moving with purpose. The exact kind of node Walker had refused to walk away from. There it is, Walker breathed, staring at the drone feed on Marcus's device. There's the whole thing. She called it off one man's eyeballs. He turned and looked at Olivia, and for a long moment he didn't say anything because there wasn't a word in the manual for what he was feeling. Sergeant Carter, In 26 years, I have never told a soldier this on the same day I met them. But I would follow you into anything. Olivia didn't answer. Her eye was still on the three men watching them slip over the saddle and vanish toward the compound she'd found for them. And she was already thinking about the next problem because that was the only place her mind ever wanted to go. Sir, she said, we have a new problem. Walker's jaw tightened. He was learning that when this young woman said the word problem, it was worth setting down everything else to listen. Go. That compound has antennas. Comms. She swallowed. Which means the men we just watched walk over that saddle are about to reach it in a few minutes and tell everyone inside that their sniper is dead, that there are American shooters on this ridge and roughly where we are. And a compound that size, that well-equipped, doesn't just absorb that news and stay put. They're going to respond in force. The silence on the observation post changed its quality. It went from the silence of relief to the silence of men doing math they didn't like the answer to. How long? Walker said. They reached the compound in maybe 5 minutes. Add time to process, to organize, to move. I'd say we have 15, maybe 20 minutes before a reaction force is heading up this mountain looking for us. Olivia finally pulled her eye off the scope and looked at the colonel directly. And there are 4 of us and 1 security element up here, sir. We are not equipped to hold this ground against what I just watched moving around inside that compound. Marcus swore under his breath. Walker didn't. Walker just nodded slowly, the way a man nods when the situation has become simple again, when the choices have narrowed down to something he can actually get his hands around. Then we don't hold this ground, Walker said. We displace. But we displace smart. Reed, get the security element moving. Now back down the reverse slope, quiet, no dust. Carter, you and I are going to be the last off this hill, and while we come off it, you are going to keep those antennas in your scope, and you are going to tell me the second anybody comes over to that saddle after us. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Then let's move. They moved. And this is the part Olivia never told anyone about afterward, not the analysts, not the students she would eventually teach, not even Marcus. Because coming off that mountain with a colonel she just met beside her and a reaction force spinning up somewhere below, she was more afraid than she had ever been in her life. Not while she'd been on the glass. On the glass there had been a number, and the number had made her calm. But now there was no number. There was only the open slope and the ticking clock and the knowledge that she had traded the safety of a fixed position for the danger of movement, and that if she'd read those men wrong, if that compound was closer or faster than she guessed, they were going to be caught in the open with nowhere to shoot from. You're quiet, Walker said low as they worked their way down. I'm counting, sir. Counting what? Everything. Distance to the saddle, distance to cover, how long it takes a man to run each of them. She kept her voice flat because flat was the only way she could keep it steady. I don't like being off the glass. On the glass I can do something. Down here I can only run. Walker actually huffed something that was almost a laugh. Now you sound like a real sniper. Reed spent his whole first year hating the ground and loving the hide. He glanced at her sideways. You know what he told me about you before I got up here, before the shot? That I read birds, sir. That you'd never been shot at. That he didn't know if you'd hold up. Walker paused as they reached a fold in the ground that gave them a moment of cover. He was worried about you. In his way, Reed doesn't worry about people he's given up on. Olivia said nothing, but something in her chest shifted just slightly. Contact, she said suddenly, dropping to a knee scope up. The saddle. We have movement on the saddle. Everything stopped. 2 figures had come over the eastern saddle, and they were not moving like grieving men recovering a body. They were moving like hunters, fast, fanned out, weapons up, and behind them, cresting the ridge, one after another, came more. Count them, Walker said. 6, 7, 8. Olivia's mouth went dry. 8 so far, sir, and more coming. That's the reaction force. That's faster than I called it. They were already moving before their men reached the compound. Somebody radioed ahead from the saddle. She'd made an error, and she knew it, and she hated it, and there was no time for any of that. They know we came off the hill. They're going to sweep the reverse slope, which is exactly where our security element is, Marcus said, appearing beside them low and breathless. Sir, if they crest that ridge behind our guys, they'll have them silhouetted. Walker's face was granite. Options. And Olivia, who 40 minutes ago had been the rookie nobody believed in, heard herself say the thing that would define the rest of the day. "I can hold the saddle, sir." Both men looked at her. "From here," she said, "I have a clean line to the top of that saddle. It's about 600 meters, and the wind's died down since the last shot, and the light's behind me now. Any man who comes over that ridge line has to cross the crest, and when he crosses the crest, he's skylined, and when he's skylined, he's mine. I can't stop all of them, but I can make crossing that saddle so expensive that they stop trying, and I can buy the security element the time they need to get clear and set up a real defense." "That puts you alone," Walker said. "That puts you as the whole tripwire by yourself while the rest of us fall back." "Not alone," Marcus said, and something in his voice had changed completely, some old wall coming down all at once. "I'll spot for her." Walker looked at the veteran. "Reed." "With respect, sir, you're a colonel, and colonels do not lie in the dirt trading rounds with a reaction force when there's a sergeant to do it for them. You get down to the security element, you organize the defense, you call in the assets that are going to end this, and you let me and Carter do the job that's ours to do." Marcus dropped down beside Olivia and pulled out his own optic. "I doubted this kid all week. Let me stand behind her when it counts." For a moment, Walker looked like he might argue. Then he looked at the two of them, the veteran and the rookie, side by side on the ground with their weapons up and their eyes on the saddle, and he understood that arguing would only waste the seconds none of them had. "Hold the saddle," he said. "Buy me 10 minutes. I'll have gunships overhead in 15. If those men crest that ridge in force, you break contact and you run, and you do not play hero, either one of you. Am I clear?" "Clear, sir," they said together. Walker gripped Olivia's shoulder once hard the way he'd gripped Marcus's when he first arrived, the grip he saved for people he counted as his own. Then he was gone, moving down the slope toward the security element, and it was just the two of them, the calculator and the veteran, who'd called her the calculator like it was an insult. "Okay, Carter," Marcus said, settling in his eye to his optic. "You drive. I'll spot. What do you need from me?" "Wind calls and body count," Olivia said. "You tell me when it drops, and you tell me how many. I'll do the rest." "Copy that." A pause. "Hey, for what it's worth." "Save it, Marcus." "For what it's worth," he pressed on. "I was wrong about you. Every day this week, wrong." "You can put it in writing after we're not dead," Olivia said. And Marcus barked a laugh that had real fear in it, and real respect too. And then they both went quiet because on the saddle, 600 meters away, the first man had begun to climb toward the crest. "Left edge of the saddle," Marcus murmured. "One tango climbing. Wind's light right to left, maybe 3. I have him. He crests in 5 seconds, 4, 3. Olivia breathed out and let the world narrow, and the fear fell away exactly the way it had before, because there was a number again, and the number made her calm. 600 meters, right to left, 3 miles an hour. A man about to be skylined against an empty sky. 2, Marcus said. 1. The man crossed the crest. Olivia fired. He dropped, and before he had finished dropping, she was already working the bolt, already hunting for the next one, and Marcus was already talking low and fast and steady in her ear. "Good hit, good hit. Second tango center saddle, he saw that he's dropping to a crouch, he's coming anyway." "I have him." "They're going to rush it now," Marcus said. "They know they can't cross one at a time. They're going to rush the crest all at once and try to overwhelm the lane. Here it comes, Carter. Here it come." And it came. 3 men broke over the crest of the saddle at once, low and fast, trying to flood the killing ground faster than one rifle could answer. It was the right tactic. Against almost any shooter, it would have worked. But almost any shooter would have panicked at 3 targets at once. Olivia didn't, because she'd already run this exact problem sometime in the last 30 seconds without even meaning to. She'd already decided the order. Nearest first because nearest was the fastest threat. Then the one on the right because the ground funneled him toward cover she couldn't see into. Then the last. She fired, worked the bolt, fired, worked the bolt, fired. 3 down, Marcus breathed, and there was awe in it, now plain and undisguised. 3 down, Carter, 3 for 3 that are going to ground. They're not crossing. They are not crossing that saddle. For a moment, the crest was empty. The reaction force had learned the lesson she'd promised to teach them. Crossing that saddle cost lives, and they had run out of appetite for the price. They'll try to flank, Olivia said, already thinking ahead. They can't come over the top, so they'll try to come around the low ground on the north side and get out of my lane. Then we've done our job, Marcus said. Every second they spend figuring out a flank is a second Walker uses to get the assets up. Listen. And now faintly under the ringing in their ears, they could both hear it, the deep thrum of rotor blades far off, but growing the sound of Walker's promise coming true. You hear that? That's 15 minutes turning into 10. You held the saddle, kid. You actually held it. But Olivia wasn't celebrating, because Olivia never celebrated until someone with more rank than her said it was over, and something on the saddle had caught her eye. A single figure at the very back, not rushing the crest, not dropping to cover, but standing, half hidden, watching. Not a soldier. She could tell by the way he held himself. He wasn't carrying a rifle up. He was carrying something else, something in his hands that he kept lifting toward his face. Marcus, she said slowly, far edge of the saddle, the one standing. What's he holding? Marcus swung his optic, went still. That's not a weapon. No, that's a radio. A big one, that's a command set. Marcus's voice dropped. Carter, that's not a fighter. That's a handler. That's the man running this whole thing. That's the guy who fed the schedule to the sniper you already killed. He came up to watch his ambush work, and instead he's watching it fall apart, and now he's on the radio to somebody. Olivia's whole body went cold and clear. He's the network, she said. He's the actual network, not the compound, him. The compound's just a building. He's the one who knows the schedules, the routes, the officers. If he gets over that saddle and disappears, they set this up again next month, and there's no rookie reading birds to stop it. He's 800 meters if he's afoot, Marcus said, and he's moving. Now he saw us look. He's turning to go back over the saddle. Carter, that's your first shot all over again. Extreme range moving target. He crests in seconds, and then he's gone forever. Give me a wind call. Carter. Marcus, her voice was iron. Give me a wind call. There was half a second where the veteran looked at the rookie and made a choice and gave her everything he had. Right to left, 4, maybe 5 gusting. He's quartering away from you, moving left about a fast walk. He crests in 3 seconds. Marcus's voice was shaking, but the numbers were clean. This is the shot, kid. This is the one that ends it. No pressure. And Olivia Carter, who this morning had been the rookie nobody believed in, who had been told that combat doesn't follow formulas, who had read a killer in the behavior of birds, in a command network, in the glance of a grieving man, breathed out and rode the wind and waited for the half second of stillness, the mountain owed her. The handler took his last step toward the crest of the saddle. The gust died. And in the clean, quiet air that opened up in its place, Olivia understood something she would spend the rest of her career trying to teach and never quite finding the words for. That Marcus had been wrong in the truck and right on the mountain both at once. Combat didn't follow formulas, but a person who had mastered the formulas so completely that she no longer had to think about them. A person who had made the numbers into instinct through thousands of hours. Nobody ever saw could do the one thing the formulas alone could never do. She could be ready. Her finger found the trigger. The handler's boot touched the crest of the saddle, one stride from the far side, one stride from vanishing, one stride from doing it all again to some other colonel on some other mountain who wouldn't be lucky enough to have her. Send it, Marcus whispered. She sent it. The rifle spoke one last time, and 800 meters away, on the crest of the saddle, the handler with the command radio in his hands took the step that should have carried him to safety and instead carried him down. Marcus watched it through his optic, and for a moment he didn't say anything at all. He just stared at the empty crest where a man had been a half second ago, and then he lowered the optic and looked at the young woman lying in the dirt beside him, and his voice, when it finally came, was not the voice of the veteran who doubted her all week. He's down, Marcus said. The handler is down. Carter, you got him. You got him. Olivia didn't move off the glass. Confirm no one recovers him. If they drag him back over that saddle, they might still get his radio, his gear, whatever's in his pockets. I want him left where he fell. Nobody's coming for him. Marcus scanned the whole saddle, slow and careful. They're broken. The whole line's broken. They rushed the crest, they lost 3, they lost their handler, and now they've got no one telling them what to do. That's what a handler is, Carter. He wasn't just a guy with a radio, he was the nerve. You cut the nerve and the whole hand stops working. And it was true. On the saddle, the reaction force that had come over the ridge like hunters had stopped hunting. Without the man at the back giving orders, they were just frightened men on an exposed ridgeline who had learned at a cost of 4 dead that crossing that crest meant dying. One by one, they began to pull back off the saddle, dragging what wounded they could reach, disappearing back down toward the compound they'd come from. "They're withdrawing," Olivia reported. "All of them, falling back east over the saddle out of my lane." That was when the sound they'd both been listening for finally arrived in full. Not a distant thrum anymore, but a hammering chest-deep roar that came up over the shoulder of the mountain and filled the whole valley. 2 gunships low and fast, exactly as Colonel Walker had promised. They swept in over the ridge and banked toward the compound, and Olivia felt the vibration of them in the ground beneath her. Marcus let out a breath that was half a laugh and half something closer to a sob. 15 minutes, he said. He said 15 minutes, and there they are. You held the saddle for 15 minutes with one rifle, Carter. You know how many people could do that? You know how many? It wasn't one rifle, Olivia said. It was one rifle and one spotter who called the wind clean every single time. She finally pulled her eye off the scope and looked at him. You didn't miss a call, Marcus. Not one. I put every round exactly where your number said. That handler was your shot as much as mine. Marcus opened his mouth and closed it, and for a man who always had something to say, he found he had nothing. He'd spent a week telling this kid that combat didn't follow formulas, that scores didn't mean anything, that she wasn't ready. And she'd just spent 15 minutes proving him wrong in the most complete way one soldier can prove another wrong, and then when it was over, she'd turned around and handed him half the credit. You're something else, he said finally. You know that you're something else, Carter. The radio crackled. It was Walker. Overwatch, this is actual. Gunships have eyes on the compound. Reaction forces in full withdrawal. Sit rep on the saddle over. Marcus keyed his mic. Actual Overwatch. Saddle is held. 4 enemy down attempting to cross, including 1 command element carrying a radio set. Reaction force has broken contact and is withdrawing east. We are secure. Over. There was a pause on the other end. A long one. Say again your last on the command element, Ento, Walker said. Confirmed, sir. 1 individual rear of the saddle carrying a large radio directing the assault. Carter identified him as a handler and engaged at approximately 800 meters as he attempted to displace. He is down and has not been recovered. Over. Another pause. And when Walker's voice came back, it was quieter, and there was something underneath it that neither of them had heard from him before. Reed, are you telling me that Sergeant Carter identified the network coordinator at extreme range moving on her own read and took him off the board before he could exfil? That's exactly what I'm telling you, sir. Then hold your position, Walker said, and do not let anyone touch that man's body until I get an intelligence team up there. Because if he is who she thinks he is, she didn't just save my life today. She just handed us the whole cell. A beat. Both of you did outstanding work. Actual out. Marcus set down the radio and lay back for a second, staring up at nothing, breathing. Then he started to laugh quietly the way men laugh when the fear finally has somewhere to go. You hear that whole cell, Carter. You understand what he's saying. That man you dropped on the saddle, if the intel team confirms it, that's months of somebody's work sitting dead on a ridgeline because you noticed which way a grieving man kept glancing. He shook his head. This morning you were reading birds, and I was calling you crazy. Now you're going to be in a briefing at battalion by tomorrow night. I don't want to be in a briefing, Olivia said. Nobody ever wants to be in the briefing. You're going to be in the briefing. But even as they talked, Olivia had gone still again, and Marcus had learned enough in the last hour to recognize what that stillness meant. It meant she'd seen something. It meant the job wasn't over no matter what the radio said. Carter. He sat up. What is it? The compound. Her eye was back on the glass, tracking the gunships as they worked over the fold of ground beyond the saddle. The gunships are hitting the vehicles and the antennas, but there's movement on the south edge away from the strike. A single vehicle. It's not running east with the reaction force. It's going south alone fast, and it's staying tight against the terrain to keep the aircraft from getting a clean angle on it. Marcus swung his optic that way. I've got it. 1 vehicle breaking south. So what? It's 1 truck running from a gunship. They'll chase it down. They won't, Olivia said. Watch the terrain it's using. It's threading a line where the ridges block the aircraft's line of sight. Whoever's driving that truck knows exactly where every blind spot on this mountain is. That's not a fighter running scared. That's somebody who planned an escape route before today ever happened. She paused and her voice dropped. Marcus, what if the man on the saddle wasn't the top of the network? What if he was the middle? What if the truck is the top? Marcus went cold. You think there's somebody above the handler? I think a handler who runs schedules and routes reports to somebody who decides which schedules and routes matter. And I think that somebody would never stand on a saddle with a radio where a sniper could see him. I think that somebody would sit in a compound safe until the exact moment it stopped being safe, and then he'd get in a truck he'd already picked on a route he'd already planned, and he'd disappear before anyone even knew to look for him. Olivia's jaw tightened. That truck is the one that matters, and it's about to get behind a ridgeline and out of the gunship's reach for good. Marcus grabbed the radio. Actual overwatch, be advised, single vehicle breaking south from the compound using terrain masking to evade air. Carter assesses it may be carrying senior network leadership, requesting the gunships reposition to interdict over. Walker's response was immediate. Overwatch, the gunships are committed to the compound and taking ground fire. Reposition time is 4 to 5 minutes minimum. Can you observe the vehicle over time? Olivia was already doing the math, and the math was ugly. Tell him no, she said quietly. Tell him in 4 minutes that truck is behind the south ridge and gone. It's already at the edge of my range, and it's still moving away. In 90 seconds, it crosses a gap in the ridge, the only gap, the only place I can see it before it disappears for good. That's the window, 90 seconds, not 4 minutes. Marcus stared at her. Carter, that's past 800. That's a moving vehicle. That's the hardest shot you'd take all day, and you're saying you get one look at it through a gap in a ridge. I know what I'm saying. You can't shoot a truck to death with a rifle. I'm not going to shoot the truck. Olivia settled into her position, and everything about her went smooth and cold and certain. I'm going to shoot the driver. Through the gap, when it crosses. One truck, one road, one gap, one driver. If I put him down, the truck stops, and it stops in the open and the gunships reach, and then they have all the time they need. Marcus looked at her for one more second. Then he made the same choice he'd made on the saddle, the choice to stop doubting and start spotting, and he put his eye to the optic. Then let's do it, he said. Talk to me about the gap. There, Olivia's voice was flat and fast. The vehicle's tracking toward a break in the south ridge, about a truck length wide from our angle. It'll be visible for maybe 2 seconds when it crosses. Range is going to be somewhere past 900. I need your best wind, and I need it now because I only get the 2 seconds. Marcus read the ground between them and the gap. All 900 meters of it, the swirl of it, the way the wind curled around the shoulder of the mountain. It's dirty air the whole way. Right to left near us switches left to right about halfway, then dies in close to the ridge. If you hold for the near wind, you'll miss right. If you hold for the far wind, you'll miss left. You have to split it. Then I'll split it. Carter splitting the wind at 900 on a moving target through a 2-second gap is not a shot. There's no formula for that. There's no number that makes that a sure thing. And here, for just a moment, Olivia Carter smiled. It was a small thing and grim, and it was the first time all day she'd let anything like it cross her face. You told me that this morning, she said, in the truck. You said combat doesn't follow formulas. She chambered around. You were right, it doesn't. The formula gets you to the edge. It gets you ready. But the last part, the part where the wind's dirty and the target's moving and you've got 2 seconds and no certainty, the formula can't do that part. She breathed out long and slow. That part you just have to trust that all the hours you put in are standing behind you. That part is faith, Marcus. It's math you can't see anymore because you turned it into instinct a long time ago. Marcus didn't say anything because he understood finally all the way down that the thing he'd mistaken for a weakness in her, the calculating, the studying, the thousands of quiet hours, was the exact thing that had built the faith she was about to spend. The formula and the instinct weren't opposites. The instinct was what the formula turned into when you'd done it enough times in the dark. The vehicle's coming up on the gap, Olivia said. Give me a countdown. It crosses in 5, Marcus said. Hold your split. Trust it. His voice steadied and became the voice of a spotter who believed in his shooter completely. 4. It's committing to the gap. 3. Olivia let the world fall away. There was no saddle behind her, no compound, no colonel on the radio, no week of being doubted, no morning in the truck. There was only 900 meters of dirty air, a gap in a ridge, and a truck about to cross it carrying a man who had spent months deciding which American officers would live and die. 2, Marcus said. She found her split. Half the near wind, half the far wind, a hold that existed nowhere in any manual, a hold that lived only in the part of her that had stopped being able to explain itself. 1, Marcus said. It's in the gap. Send it. The truck filled the gap. Olivia sent it. For 2 full seconds, nobody breathed because at 900 meters, the bullet takes a long time to fly. And in that time, there was nothing to do but wait and find out whether all the hours had been enough. The truck moved. The round crossed the valley. And then the truck, which had been moving fast and straight and sure along a route someone had planned for exactly this moment, wandered. It drifted. It slowed. And then it turned gently without anyone steering it and rolled off the road and came to a stop in the open ground on the far side of the gap. Its driver slumped over a wheel he was no longer holding. Marcus made a sound that wasn't a word. It stopped, Olivia said. Her voice was barely a whisper. The vehicle stopped. It's in the open. Get the gunships on it before anyone else gets behind that wheel. Marcus fumbled for the radio, his hands not quite working right. Actual Overwatch, the south vehicle is stopped, repeat, stopped, and disabled in the open ground, south of the ridge gap. Driver is down, request immediate air on that vehicle before they recover it over. The response came back fast and hard, and behind Walker's voice, they could both hear the gunships already changing their note, already banking south. Overwatch, we have it. We are repositioning now that vehicle is not going anywhere. Reed, tell me Carter took that shot. She took it, sir. Marcus's voice cracked wide open. 900 meters moving vehicle through a 2-second gap in the ridge, dirty wind the whole way. She shot the driver. She called the whole thing, and then she made the shot. Sir, I've been doing this 14 years, and I have never in my life. He stopped because he couldn't finish it, because there was nothing at the end of that sentence that would hold the weight of what he'd just watched. Understood, Walker said very quietly. Understood, Sergeant Reed. Hold your position. Both of you. We'll take it from here. And then it was done. The gunships settled over the stopped vehicle. The compound burned. The reaction force was gone. The saddle was quiet. And on the observation post where the whole day had started, 2 snipers lay side by side in the dirt. One of them shaking now that there was finally room to shake the other one, perfectly still watching because watching was the job, and she didn't yet believe the job was over. Carter, Marcus's voice was rough. You can stand down. It's over. You can come off the glass. Not until Walker says. Walker's going to say, Carter, Olivia. It was the first time he'd used her first name, and it landed like a hand on her shoulder. You did it. All of it. The colonel, the saddle, the handler, the truck. You want to know the truth. This morning I would have bet my pension you'd freeze the first time somebody shot back. I was wrong. I've never been so wrong about a soldier in my life. And I'm telling you that so you hear it from the guy who doubted you loudest. For a long moment, Olivia didn't answer. And then finally she let her finger come off the trigger and she let her eye come off the glass and she rolled onto her back and looked up at the sky where the gunships were still circling and she let out a breath that seemed to carry the entire day out of her body at once. You know what the strangest part is? She said. What? I wasn't scared on the glass. Not once. Not on the first shot, not on the saddle, not on the truck. She stared up at the sky. The only time I was scared all day was walking down that slope with the colonel when there wasn't a shot to take, when there was no number to hold on to. That's the only time my hands wanted to shake. She turned her head and looked at him. What does that make me, Marcus? What kind of person is only calm when they've got a rifle and a target and everybody's counting on them not to miss? Marcus was quiet for a moment, and then he gave her the truest answer he had. It makes you a sniper, he said. The real kind, not the kind with the scores, the kind that the scores were always trying to find. Far below them, the intelligence team was already moving up the mountain toward the saddle, toward the handler with the radio, toward the confirmation that would turn a rookie's read into a documented fact. And farther south, another team was moving toward a stopped truck in the open ground, toward a driver slumped over a wheel, toward whatever that man had been carrying that he'd been so certain was worth a pre-planned escape route. Neither Marcus nor Olivia knew yet what that team would find inside the truck. Neither of them knew that the man behind the wheel would turn out to be more important than the handler, more important than the sniper, more important than anyone on that mountain had guessed. Neither of them knew that what she'd stopped on that road in 2 seconds through a gap in a ridge would still be the subject of closed-door briefings a year later. All they knew lying in the dirt as the sun moved and the gunships circled was that the rookie nobody had believed in that morning had put 3 impossible shots into 3 impossible targets and had been right about every single thing she'd seen, from the birds in the village to the glance of a grieving man to the route of a truck driven by someone who thought he'd planned for everything. Everything except her. Overwatch, this is actual. Walker's voice came over the radio one more time, and it was steadier now and warmer. Intel team is 30 minutes out from your position. Stand down and hold. And Carter. Olivia reached for the radio. Go ahead, sir. There was a pause. When Walker spoke again, it was not the voice of a colonel talking to a sergeant. It was the voice of a man who had knelt in the dirt that morning and held perfectly still on the word of someone he'd just met and lived because of it. This morning I told you, scores don't mean much up here, Walker said. I owe you a correction. It was never the scores I should have been measuring. It was whether you'd be ready when it counted, and you were ready before any of us knew we'd need you to be. Another pause. Get some rest, Sergeant. You earned it. Actual out. Olivia set down the radio. She lay back in the dirt beside Marcus, and above them, the gunship circled, and below them, the teams climbed toward the answers. And for the first time all day, she closed her eyes. She did not think about the shots. She did not think about the record or the range or the impossible win. She thought about a colonel who was alive to go home, and a security element that had gotten off the mountain, and a next month that would not now hold an ambush for some other officer on some other ridge. That was the part worth keeping, not the distance, never the distance. The levis or sangin agam parsia. Bạn nói đúng, phần 3 tôi viết ngắn hơn yêu cầu 7.000 đến 7.500 từ khá nhiều. Tôi sẽ viết bổ sung để nối tiếp liền mạch phần 3, kéo dài thêm nội dung cho đủ độ dài, mà không lặp lại, không tóm tắt lại. Tôi viết tiếp ngay từ chỗ Olivia, nhắm mắt lại trên đài quan sát. But rest on that mountain was a thing you borrowed, never a thing you kept. Olivia's eyes had barely closed when Marcus spoke again, low and careful, the way a man speaks when he doesn't want to be right about what he's seeing. Carter, I hate to do this to you. She was back on the glass before he finished the sentence. Where? The intel team. He nodded down the slope toward the small line of figures working their way up toward the saddle. They're moving good, but look past them. The reverse slope, the low ground on the north side. Tell me I'm imagining it. Olivia found the low ground, and her stomach dropped for the second time that hour. There were men in it, 3 of them, maybe 4, moving slow and flat, hugging the dead ground where neither the gunships above nor the intel team below could see them. They weren't withdrawing east with the broken reaction force. They'd peeled off, they'd gone quiet, and they were flowing along the one line of the mountain that led straight toward the intel team's flank. They're not imaginary, she said. 4 of them. They broke off from the withdrawal and doubled back low. They're setting up to hit the intel team from the side while everyone thinks the fight's over. The intel team doesn't see them, Marcus said. They can't. The terrain's got them blind on that flank. And the gunships are committed south on the truck. Olivia's mind was already 3 moves ahead, already hating every one of them. Nobody's watching that flank but us. If those 4 get into position, they'll catch the intel team crossing the open stretch below the saddle. Same trick the sniper tried on the colonel. Let the important people walk into a lane and then open up. Marcus grabbed the radio. Actual overwatch, be advised, 4 enemy moving on the intel team's north flank. Through dead ground, the team is blind to them over. Walker's voice came back tight. Overwatch, can the team be warned in time to hold over? Olivia did the math, and the math said no. Tell them if the team stops now, they stop in the open. If they keep moving, they walk into the lane. Either way, those 4 are going to have shots in about 2 minutes, and the intel team can't get to cover from where they are. She swallowed. The only way the team crosses safe is if those 4 never get set up. And the only ones who can reach those 4 right now are us. Marcus keyed the mic and repeated it, and there was a silence on the other end that told them Walker was doing the same math and hating the same answer. Overwatch, Walker said finally. The intel team on that saddle is carrying the only thing that makes today mean anything past this afternoon. If we lose them, we lose the handler's identity, the network, all of it. Can you cover that flank over? Marcus looked at Olivia. Olivia was already ranging the dead ground. We can cover it, she said. But Marcus, this is different from the saddle. On the saddle, they had to cross a crest and skyline themselves. These four are staying low. They're smart. They're going to give me nothing but a head and a shoulder at a time, moving between cover, and I've got to put them all down before any one of them gets set on the team. Miss one, hesitate on one, and the team pays for it. Then don't miss and don't hesitate, Marcus said. It wasn't doubt, it was the opposite. It was a man handing his shooter the only thing that would help. Same as before. You drive, I spot. Where do you want to start? Rearmost, Olivia said. Always rearmost. If I start with the lead man, the others go to ground and I lose them in the dead space. If I start from the back and work forward, the men ahead don't know their rear's gone until it's too late. They keep moving toward the team, thinking they're covered, and every step forward is a step into my next shot. Marcus felt something move in his chest that he didn't have a word for. Because that wasn't a thing you taught. That was a thing you found in someone, or you didn't. Rearmost, he agreed. He's low behind that shelf of rock he's going to have to come up and over to keep pace. When he does, you've got him for maybe a second and a half. Call it. He's moving. He's coming up on the shelf. He crests in 3, 2, wind's light quartering, hold a hair right. A breath. 1, he's up. The man came up over the shelf. Olivia fired and worked the bolt, and the man went down behind the rock he'd been trying to climb, and the 3 ahead of him never even turned around because they'd heard shots all day, and one more meant nothing when it came from behind and didn't touch them. Rears down, Marcus breathed. They don't know. They're still moving on the team. Next one, he's 20 meters forward, low moving right along that gully. I have the gully. He's going to pop up where it shallows out, right at the bend. He can't stay low there, the ground won't let him. When he hits the bend, he lifts. Olivia settled on the bend before the man reached it, waiting for the ground itself to betray him, the way she'd waited for the dark window that morning. She had learned the whole shape of this mountain in a single day, every fold and shelf and gully, and now the mountain was working for her, funneling her targets into the exact places she'd already put her crosshair. The man hit the bend. The ground lifted him. Olivia fired. 2 down. Down, Marcus said, and now his voice had an edge of something almost like disbelief watching her dismantle a flanking element, one man at a time while the men still standing had no idea their line was dying from the back. 2 left, and Carter, the front 2, just reached the edge of the open stretch. The intel team's about to cross it. You've got maybe 40 seconds before those 2 have their shots. Then I've got 40 seconds to end 2 men who are about to go still and aim. Olivia's voice never changed. Which one's leading? Left man, he's the one setting up first. He's dropping into a firing position behind that hump of dirt. He's getting his weapon up. He's the immediate threat to the team. And the right man, still moving, looking for his own spot. Then the left man first, Olivia said, and I take him in the next 5 seconds because the second he set the teams in his sights. She breathed out. Give me the wind. Light left to right too. He's settling. He's almost set. Carter, he's about to have the team. This is the shot. I have him. The left man settled his weapon toward the open stretch, where 40 meters below the intel team was just beginning to cross, carrying the answers, carrying the meaning of the whole day blind to the rifle that was steadying toward them. Olivia's rifle was steadier. She fired and the left man never took his shot, and the intel team kept crossing, never knowing how close they'd come, never knowing a round had beaten theirs by half a second. Left man down, Marcus said. 1 left. The right man, he saw that one, Carter. He saw his partner drop. He knows. Now he knows there's a shooter. He's turning. He's looking for us. Let him look. Where is he? He's spooked. He's up out of his position. He's trying to get back to the dead ground. He's moving fast and wild. He's not thinking. He's just running. Marcus tracked him. He's going to cross a 10-meter open patch to reach cover. That's your only look. He's moving flat out. If he makes the cover, he's gone into the dead space, and he might still work around to the team later. He won't make the cover. Carter, he's running full speed. That's a moving target across 10 meters. You get one? Marcus? Her voice was calm as still water. I put a bullet through a truck window at 900 meters 20 minutes ago. Give me the wind and count him into the open. There was half a beat where Marcus almost laughed because she was right and because he'd somehow already forgotten in the space of 20 minutes that the impossible had become the ordinary with this kid beside him. Light wind, right to left 2, hold a touch left, he said. He hits the open in 3, 2, lead him, 1, he's in the open, send it. Olivia led the running man the exact width her instinct told her, an amount she could no longer have explained if her life depended on it, and she sent the round into the space where he was going to be, rather than the space where he was. He ran into it. He fell in the open 10 meters from the cover he'd been sprinting for, and the flank went silent, and the intel team finished crossing the open stretch and reached the saddle, never knowing that 4 men had died in the dead ground to let them get there. For a long moment, neither Marcus nor Olivia said anything. Below them, the team gathered around the handler's body doing their quiet work, oblivious. The gunship circled south over the stopped truck. The mountain, which had tried all day to kill a colonel and an intel team and had failed at every single attempt, went still. Marcus lowered his optic. He looked at the 4 bodies scattered across the dead ground, the flanking element that had never landed a single shot taken apart from the back forward by a rookie who'd started the day being called crazy for reading birds. And then he looked at her, and when he spoke, his voice was thick. They'll never know, he said. The intel team, they'll finish their work, and they'll walk back down this mountain, and they'll go home someday, and they will never know that 4 men were 60 seconds from cutting them down, and that you stopped every one of them before they could. He shook his head slowly. You saved their lives, and they'll never even know your name. Olivia finally came off the glass. She looked at the 4 bodies and then at the team below who would never know. And something crossed her face that wasn't pride, that wasn't relief, that was something quieter and heavier than both. Good, she said. Marcus blinked. Good. That's the whole job, Marcus. She said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Nobody's supposed to know. The best shots I took today are the ones nobody will ever be able to point to. Not the colonel, not the record. These 4 in the dead ground, saving people who will never learn my name. She rolled onto her back again and stared at the sky. The shots people talk about are the ones that looked hard. The shots that matter are the ones that stopped something before anyone even saw it coming. And those are always the ones nobody remembers. Marcus didn't answer right away. He was thinking about a truck ride that morning, about a lecture he'd given a quiet young sergeant on how combat didn't follow formulas, on how she couldn't calculate her way through a real fight. He'd been so sure. He'd been so completely sure that he understood something she didn't. And she'd spent the whole day showing him that the thing he'd mistaken for coldness in her, the calculating, the studying, the endless quiet hours, was in fact the deepest kind of care there was. She hadn't been calculating to win. She'd been calculating so that people who'd never know her name would get to go home. Overwatch, this is actual. Walker's voice one more time. Intel team reports the north flank is clear. They say they never took fire. Reed did something happen up there I should know about, over. Marcus keyed the mic. He looked at Olivia, who shook her head slightly, who didn't want it in a report, who wanted those 4 shots to stay exactly as invisible as they'd been meant to be. And Marcus, who had doubted her all week and would spend the rest of his career telling this story, made a decision. Actual Overwatch, he said. Nothing to report. The flank was quiet. The team safe. He paused. Carter had eyes on it the whole time. Nothing got past her. It was the truth. All of it. And none of it. And it was exactly what she'd wanted. Understood, Walker said, and something in his voice suggested he understood more than the words carried. Good work, both of you. Come on home. Actual out. Marcus set down the radio. Olivia was already gathering her gear, already moving on, already thinking about the walk down and the wind that would be shaking her hands the moment there was no more shooting to do. For the radio record, Marcus said. Off the radio, just you and me. He looked at her. Those 4. That was the best shooting I've ever seen a human being do. And nobody will ever know but us. Olivia slung her rifle and looked out one last time over the mountain that had tried so hard to take so many lives and had gone home empty. That's how I want it, she said. And she started down the slope, and this time walking down with no shot left. To take her hands did not shake at all. The walk down that mountain took 40 minutes, and by the time Olivia's boots hit the valley floor, the story of what had happened up on that ridge was already moving faster than she was. That was the thing about the military. Nobody announced anything and everybody knew everything. By the time the intel team had bagged and tagged the handler with the radio, by the time the recovery element had reached the stopped truck in the open ground and looked at what was inside it, a current had started to run through the whole forward operating base, quiet and electric. The kind of current that meant something had happened that people were going to be talking about for a long time. Olivia didn't feel any of it. She felt tired. She felt the specific hollow tiredness of a person who has been calm for too many hours in a row and is now paying the whole bill at once. She wanted water and she wanted to sit down, and she wanted more than anything for nobody to look at her. Which was exactly when everybody started looking at her. "That's her," she heard low as she crossed toward the medical tent to get checked out like everyone did after contact. "That's the one. That's the shooter. The rookie. That's what I heard. First deployment. Never been shot at before today." Olivia kept her eyes forward and kept walking. Marcus fell into step beside her, and she noticed he'd angled himself slightly, putting his body between her and the worst of the stairs the way a man does when he's decided somebody belongs to him now. "You're famous," Marcus said quietly. "Don't. I'm not doing it to needle you. I'm telling you, so you're ready for it. By tonight, everybody on this base is going to know your name. By tomorrow, it'll be at battalion. By next week," he shrugged. "I've seen guys pull off one good thing and spend a year being asked to tell the story. You pulled off 4 impossible things in one afternoon. This isn't going away, Carter. You'd better decide right now how you want to carry it." "I don't want to carry it at all. That's not one of the options." She stopped walking, turned to look at him, and there was something raw in her face that she almost never let anyone see, the thing underneath the calculator, underneath the calm. "Marcus, those men are dead. The sniper, the 3 on the saddle, the handler, the driver, the 4 in the dead ground. 10 men. I killed 10 men today." Her voice didn't rise, but it shook just slightly at the edges. "And people want to shake my hand about it. They want to tell me it's amazing. They want me to feel good." She shook her head. "I did what I had to do, and I'd do every single one of them again, and I don't regret a single trigger pull because every one of them saved somebody. But I am not going to stand around and let people turn it into a highlight reel. 10 men. That's not a highlight reel, that's 10 men." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and then he nodded slow because he understood. He'd been where she was a long time ago, the first time the number stopped being abstract. "Okay," he said, "then we carry it that way. Not as a trophy, as a weight. That's the right way to carry it. That's the way the good ones carry it." He put a hand on her shoulder. "But hear me on one thing. You don't get to decide whether people are grateful. That colonel is alive tonight. His wife still has a husband. His kids still have a father. You don't get to tell them not to be grateful, and you don't get to tell yourself the gratitude is fake. Both things are true at once, Carter. It weighs a ton, and it was worth it. You're going to have to learn to hold both." She didn't answer, but something in her shoulders came down just a little under his hand. They'd barely reached the medical tent when a runner found them, a young specialist who looked like he'd sprinted the whole way. "Sergeant Carter." The specialist was breathless. "Colonel Walker wants you, both of you. Command tent, now." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "She hasn't even been cleared by medical yet." He said, "Now, Staff Sergeant Dill." He said, and I'm quoting him, "Drop what they're doing and bring them to me." The command tent, when they reached it, was not what Olivia had expected. She'd expected a debrief, a row of hard faces, a stenographer, the machinery of the Army grinding a chaotic afternoon into a clean report. And some of that was there. But at the center of it was Colonel James Walker, and he was not sitting behind a table waiting to interrogate her. He was standing, and the moment she stepped through the flap, he crossed the tent toward her. "Sergeant Carter." He stopped in front of her, and then in front of a tent full of officers and analysts, Colonel James Walker, 26 years and 2 wars, did something that made the whole room go still. He came to attention and he saluted her. Olivia froze. A colonel did not salute a sergeant. That was not how it worked. That was not how any of it worked. "Sir," she said, "you don't—" "I know I don't." Walker held the salute. "Return it, Sergeant. That's an order." Her hand came up. She returned the salute, and Walker dropped his, and only then did he speak to the room. For those of you who weren't up on that mountain, Walker said, let me tell you what this soldier did today, so there's no confusion in any report that leaves this tent. This morning I dismissed her. I want that on the record too. She warned me off a position and I laughed at her. I told her scores don't mean anything, and instinct without evidence gets people killed. He let that sit. 90 seconds later, she identified an enemy sniper that had been tracking my movements for days, hidden in a position that a dozen trained observers had looked at and called empty. She kept me alive by ordering me a colonel to hold perfectly still while she solved a firing problem that our own ballistics people have since called statistically improbable. And then she did it 3 more times. The tent was silent. She held a saddle against a reaction force with one rifle. She identified and eliminated the network's handler at extreme range as he tried to escape. She stopped a vehicle carrying senior leadership through a 2-second window at over 900 meters. And Walker paused and looked at her, and something passed between them, some acknowledgement of the 4 shots in the dead ground that had gone into no report. And she did several other things today that I'm told were quiet and clean, and that saved lives that would otherwise have been lost. That's all I'll say about those. Olivia felt her face go hot. He knew. Of course he knew. Marcus had said nothing over the radio, but Walker had put it together anyway, and he was honoring the silence and acknowledging the truth at the same time exactly the way she'd wanted and hadn't known how to ask for. An intelligence officer stepped forward, a major with tired eyes and a folder in his hands. Sir, if I may, there's something the sergeant should hear directly. Walker nodded. Go ahead, Major. The major turned to Olivia. Sergeant Carter, the individual you engaged in the vehicle, the driver. He opened the folder. We recovered documents from that truck, and I need you to understand what you stopped because I don't think you know yet. He paused. The handler you killed on the saddle, the one with the radio, we'd been aware of him. Mid-level coordinator, valuable but replaceable. We assumed he was the top of this particular cell. He wasn't, Olivia said quietly. She'd known it on the mountain. She'd felt it. He wasn't, the major confirmed. The man in the truck was. And he wasn't just the top of this cell. The documents suggest he was a regional coordinator responsible for at least 3 other networks across the province. He had schedules, Sergeant. Movement schedules, not just for us, for coalition officers, for local officials, for aid convoys. He'd been building a targeting picture for months. The major looked up from the folder, and his tired eyes had something urgent in them now. There was a list in that truck, names and routines. We're still going through it, but I can already tell you that if that man had reached the terrain south of the ridge and disappeared, the ambush he set for the colonel today would have been the first of many. You didn't stop one attack. You collapsed a targeting operation that would have played out over the next year. Nobody in the tent said anything. How many? Olivia asked. Her voice was very low. Sergeant, the list, the names, how many people were on it? The major hesitated. That's not really the kind of thing. How many? Walker gave a small nod and the major exhaled and answered. 41, and he said, 41 named individuals with associated schedules. We'll be reaching out to every one of them to change their patterns. Some of them will never know how close it came. But 41 people are going to keep living their normal lives, and none of them will ever know that the reason is a shot fired through a gap in a ridge by someone they'll never meet. 41. Olivia stood very still. She'd walked down that mountain thinking about 10 men she'd killed, carrying it like a stone. And now she was being handed the other side of the ledger, the side she never got to see the 41 names that would go on living because of the truck she'd stopped. 10 lives taken, 41 saved. And behind the 41, all the people who loved them, all the families that would stay whole, all the futures that would keep unspooling in ordinary directions because a rookie had noticed which way a truck was running. She understood standing there that this was what Marcus had meant, that she was going to have to learn to hold both, the weight and the worth, the 10 and the 41. Neither one canceled the other. Both were true at the same time, and a person who wanted to do this work honestly had to carry both without letting either one go. I don't want the list, she said finally. The major blinked. Sergeant, the 41 names, I don't want them. Don't tell me who they are. She swallowed. If I know their names, I'll spend the rest of my life checking on them. I'll want to know they're okay. And that's not my job. My job was the shot. Their job is to keep living and never think about me at all. That's how it's supposed to work. Let it work that way. The major looked at her for a long moment, and then he closed the folder, and something in his expression had shifted into something like reverence. Yes, Sergeant, he said. As you wish. That was when Marcus, standing off to the side, said something he hadn't planned to say, said it out loud in front of the colonel and the major and the whole tent because he couldn't hold it in anymore. You want to know the thing that gets me? Yeah, Marcus said. Every head turned. This morning in the truck coming up, I told her combat doesn't follow formulas. I told her she couldn't calculate her way through a real fight. I told her she'd probably freeze. He shook his head and his voice was rough. And I've been standing here for 10 minutes doing the math on how wrong I was, and I can't finish it. Because it's not just that she didn't freeze. It's that the calculating was never the opposite of instinct. The calculating was how she built the instinct. All those hours, everybody made fun of her for the wind studies, the ballistic tables, the sitting alone doing math nobody asked her to do. That's what was standing behind every shot she took today. The formula didn't fail her in combat. The formula turned into something she didn't even have to think about anymore. And that's the thing I was too dumb to see for a whole week. Walker looked at Marcus and then at Olivia, and there was the ghost of a smarting on his face. Staff Sergeant Reed, he said, that might be the wisest thing I've heard you say in the 10 years I've known you. Don't get used to it, sir, Marcus said, and the tent laughed and some of the terrible weight in the air lifted just enough to breathe. The debrief went on for another 2 hours. Every shot was reviewed. The ballistics people came in and asked her to walk them through the truck, shot in particular the 900-meter shot through the gap, and when she described the split wind hold, the way she'd taken half the near wind and half the far wind, a hold that existed in no manual. One of the ballistics officers actually set down his pen and stared at her. You calculated that in the 2 seconds you had, he asked. I didn't calculate it, Olivia said. That's the part I can't explain in a report, and I know that's a problem for you. I didn't calculate it. I've done so much calculating over so many years that at some point the calculating stopped being something I do and became something I am. When the truck crossed the gap, I didn't run the numbers. I just knew where to hold. Because every one of those thousands of hours was already in my hands. She paused. If you write it up as skill, that's fine. But the honest word for it is that I practiced for something I couldn't predict until I was ready for anything I couldn't predict. And when the unpredictable thing came, my hands already knew. The ballistics officer wrote none of that down because none of it fit in a box on a form. But he never forgot it. And years later, when he taught, he'd repeat her words almost exactly to students who'd never heard the name Olivia Carter about how the deepest skill is the kind that has stopped feeling like skill at all. When the debrief finally ended, when the officers had filed out and the analysts had packed up their folders and the tent had mostly emptied, Colonel Walker asked Olivia to stay behind. Marcus made to leave with the others, but Walker stopped him too. You stay, Reed. This concerns you both. When it was just the three of them, Walker's whole manner changed. The commander receded, and what was left was just a man older, tired, alive because of the young woman in front of him. I'm going to tell you something, Walker said, and I need you to actually hear it, Carter, because I can tell you're the type to let a compliment slide off you and go back to being hard on yourself. He looked at her steadily. I have a wife named Ellen. I have 2 daughters, one in college, one about to be. Tonight, when I get a chance, I'm going to call Ellen, and I'm not going to tell her what happened because I never tell her the bad ones. But I'm going to hear her voice. And my daughters are going to have a father walk them down aisles someday and stand in the back at graduations and be an old man someday complaining about his knees. His voice thickened. That entire future, Carter, every bit of it exists because you read a threat in a bird that wouldn't land on a window. Do you understand what I'm telling you? You didn't save a colonel today. You saved a husband and a father and an old man who hasn't happened yet. Olivia's eyes were burning. She didn't trust herself to speak. So here is what I need from you, Walker went on. I need you to stop treating what you did as something to apologize for. I saw your face out there when people were staring. I know what you're doing. You are counting the 10, and that's good. That's right, a soldier who stops counting the 10 has lost something important. But you don't get to only count the 10. You have to count Ellen too. You have to count my daughters. You have to count 41 names you refuse to learn. That's the deal. That's the whole deal of being what you are. You carry all of it or you're not carrying it honestly. For a long moment, nobody said anything. And then Olivia, in a voice barely above a whisper, said the truest thing she'd said all day. I don't know how, sir. And Walker, who had been carrying his own inversion of that exact weight for 26 years, gave her the only answer he had. Nobody knows how, he said gently. You just do it anyway. You get up tomorrow and you do it anyway. And you find people who carry the same weight and you don't carry it alone. He glanced at Marcus. You've already got one. That man doubted you for a week and then spotted every shot you took today without missing a call. That's someone who will help you carry it. Don't let go of that. Marcus cleared his throat hard and looked at the ground. There's one more thing, Walker said, straightening. The commander came back into his voice, but softer now. I'm putting you both in for recognition. I know you don't want it, Carter. I can see it on your face. You can hate the medal all you want, but the medal isn't for you. The medal is so that the next young sniper who gets called crazy for reading birds, for spending too much time on the math, for being too quiet and too careful, has a name to point to. The medal is so that when some veteran tells some rookie that she calculates too much, in combat doesn't follow formulas, that rookie can say, tell that to Olivia Carter. He paused. You don't get to be invisible, Sergeant. Not entirely. Because there are people coming up behind you who need to see that someone like them can be exactly who they are and still be the one who saves everyone. That's bigger than your comfort. I'm sorry, but it is. Olivia was quiet for a long time, and then slowly she nodded. Then let it be for them, sir, she said. Not for me, for the next quiet one, the next calculator, the next kid everybody laughs at for caring too much about the wind. Deal, Walker said. It was the same word he'd used that morning when he'd bet her that her window would come up empty and she'd have to admit her instinct was worthless. He remembered it too. She could see him remembering it. For the record, Sergeant, this morning I said deal to you and I was certain I'd win that bet. I remember, sir. I have never in my life been happier to lose. That night, Olivia sat alone outside her tent for a long time and she did the thing Walker had told her to do, the impossible thing. She counted the 10. She let herself feel every one of them, the sniper, the men on the saddle, the handler, the driver, the 4 in the dead ground. She didn't look away from any of them. And then when she'd counted all at 10 and felt the full weight of them, she made herself do the other thing. She thought about a woman named Ellen she would never meet, hearing her husband's voice on a phone call. She thought about 2 girls being walked down 2 aisles someday. She thought about 41 names she'd refused to learn, going about 41 ordinary lives never knowing. 10 and 41, the weight and the worth. She sat with both of them and she didn't let either one go, and somewhere in the small hours she found that Walker had been right. You didn't learn how. You just did it anyway. You got up tomorrow and you carried all of it, the taking and the saving, the terrible math of a job where the same steady hands that ended 10 lives were the only reason 41 others got to keep theirs. Marcus found her out there near dawn. He didn't say anything. He just sat down beside her and handed her a cup of coffee, and the two of them watched the sky go pale over the mountain that had tried to take so much and gone home with so little. You sleep? He finally asked. No. Yeah, me neither. He sipped his coffee. You will eventually. Not tonight, but eventually. It gets to where you can hold it and still sleep. Takes a while. Marcus? Yeah. Thank you for the flank, for not putting it in the report, for spotting every shot. She looked at him. For being wrong about me out loud in that tent in front of the colonel. That took something. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he shrugged the way men do when they're feeling something too big to say straight. I've been doing this 14 years, he said, and I've spent all 14 thinking I could tell just by looking at a soldier who had it and who didn't. I was proud of that, thought it was wisdom. He shook his head slowly. You cured me of that in one afternoon. Turns out I couldn't tell at all. Turns out the one I was most sure would break was the one who held when it mattered more than it's ever mattered for me. He looked at her. So thank you too. For showing an old man he still had something to learn. Most people my age would rather die than find that out. The sun came up over the mountain. Somewhere on a base far away, a colonel was probably already on a phone, hearing a voice named Ellen. Somewhere across the province, 41 people were waking up to ordinary days they'd never know they almost didn't get. And on a plastic chair outside a tent, a rookie nobody had believed in 24 hours ago sat next to the veteran who doubted her loudest and drank her coffee and carried the whole terrible, beautiful weight of it and did not set any of it down. She had learned the thing that no score could measure and no formula could teach. Not how to make the shot. She'd always known how to make the shot. She'd learned how to live with having made it. And that, more than the range, more than the wind, more than any record anyone would ever put in a file, was the thing that made her what the scores had always been trying to find. The medal came 7 months later in a ceremony Olivia had dreaded for exactly as long. She stood at attention while a general she'd never met read words about her that felt like they belonged to someone else, and she thought about the deal she'd made with Walker in that tent. Not for me, for the next quiet one. She held on to that the whole time because it was the only thing that kept her from feeling like a fraud standing up there while people applauded a day that had cost 10 lives. Walker was there. He had flown in for it on his own time, and when the ceremony ended, he found her before anyone else could. "You hated every second of that," he said. "Every single one, sir." "Good," he smiled. "That's how I know you deserved it. The ones who love the ceremony are usually the ones who shouldn't be up there." He looked at her and his face grew serious. "I've got news. That's partly why I came. You're being reassigned." Olivia's stomach tightened. "Where, sir?" "The Sniper Training Center. Stateside." Walker watched her face. "They want you as an instructor." For a moment, she couldn't speak. "Sir, I've got one deployment. There are men at that school with 20 years. They'll eat me alive. Who's going to listen to a sniper who's been to combat exactly once?" "Everyone," Walker said simply. "That's the point, Carter. You don't teach there because you've done it 1,000 times. You teach there because of what you did the one time it counted, and because you can explain the thing that nobody else can explain." He paused. "You remember what you told the ballistics officer about how the calculating became something you are instead of something you do, about practicing for something you couldn't predict until you were ready for anything." "I remember. Nobody at that school can teach that. They can teach the tables. They can teach the fundamentals. But that last thing, the thing that turns math into instinct, the thing that lets a person make a shot that has no formula, that's the thing that's been walking soldiers out of that school half-finished for years." Walker's voice was quiet and certain. "You can teach it because you lived the whole arc of it. You were the quiet kid everyone laughed at for caring too much, and then you were the one who saved everyone. There are young snipers coming up right now who are exactly where you were, getting mocked, getting doubted, being told they calculate too much. They need to hear from someone who was them and who turned out to be right." Olivia was silent for a long moment. "Marcus," she finally said, "is he? Reed's rotating home too, different timeline, but he'll be stateside. He knows about the assignment." Walker's mouth twitched. He said I'm quoting, "Tell that kid I'm going to come sit in the back of her classroom just so I can watch her make some cocky 20-year-old feel exactly the way she made me feel." Olivia laughed the first real laugh she'd managed all day. He would, and he will." Walker put a hand on her shoulder, the grip he saved for his own. "Take the assignment, Carter. Not because you want it. I know you don't. Take it for the same reason you let me pin that thing on you today. For the next one." She took the assignment. The first day she stood in front of a classroom of young snipers, she nearly walked back out. They looked at her the way her own team had looked at her a lifetime ago. Skeptical, measuring, a room full of people wondering what this quiet woman could possibly teach them. She recognized the look because she'd been on the receiving end of it her whole career. And in the third row, there was one young soldier in particular, arms crossed, jaw set, radiating the specific contempt of someone who'd already decided this was a waste of his time. His name, she'd learned, was Private First Class Dawson. He had the highest range scores in his class and the loudest mouth, and he reminded her painfully of every veteran who'd ever told her that combat didn't follow formulas. "Ma'am," Dawson said before she'd even finished writing her name on the board, "no disrespect, but is it true you've only got one deployment?" The room went quiet. It was a challenge, plain and open, and every soldier in that room leaned in to see how she'd handle it. Olivia set down the marker. She turned around. And she did not get defensive because she'd learned a long time ago that getting defensive was how you lost a room like this. That's true, she said. One deployment, one afternoon of real combat if we're being precise, a few hours. She looked at Dawson steadily. You've got a question underneath the question? Ask the real one. Dawson blinked, thrown off. The real one? You want to know what a person with one afternoon of combat can teach you? She said it for him without heat. It's a fair question. I'd have asked it. So let me answer it, and then you can decide whether to listen to the rest of what I say for the next 12 weeks. She leaned against the desk. I can't teach you what 20 deployments teaches. I've never had them. What I can teach you is what happens in the afternoon you can't predict. The one where everything you trained for shows up at once, and you've got 2 seconds and no certainty and somebody's life in your hands. Because I've had that afternoon, and I can tell you exactly what stood between the people I was protecting and a very bad day. She paused. It wasn't my scores. Yours are probably better than mine were. It was the thousands of hours nobody saw, the wind studies I got mocked for, the math I did alone that everyone said was pointless. That's the thing I'm here to teach, not how to shoot. You can already shoot. How to be ready for the shot you can't see coming. The room was dead silent now. Even Dawson had uncrossed his arms. You want to know the secret? Olivia said. It's not one perfect moment. Everybody comes here chasing the one perfect moment. The record shot. The impossible distance. The story you tell for the rest of your life. She shook her head. The secret is the thousands of hours nobody sees. The moment is just where those hours become visible. If you spend your whole career chasing the moment, you'll never build the hours that make the moment possible. And when your afternoon comes, and it will come for some of you, you'll reach for something that isn't there. Dawson raised his hand. His voice was different now. The contempt was gone. Ma'am, can I ask what happened in your afternoon? Olivia was quiet for a moment, and then she told them. Not all of it, not the 4 in the dead ground which stayed hers. But she told them about the birds, about the empty window everyone else called empty, about a colonel who laughed at her and then held perfectly still on her word, about a shot through a gap that had no formula and a driver in a truck who turned out to matter more than anyone knew, and 41 names she'd refused to learn. 41 people are alive right now, she finished, and they'll never know my name. And that's not a tragedy. That's the whole point. The best shots you'll ever take are the ones nobody will ever be able to point to. If you're doing this for the story, for the record, for people to know your name, you're going to be disappointed because the shots that matter most are always the invisible ones. You have to learn to be okay being the reason someone lives without ever getting to be the reason they know they lived. When the class ended, none of them moved for a moment, and then slowly they filed out quieter than they'd come in. Dawson lingered. Ma'am, he hesitated. I've been getting a lot of grief in my class for overthinking, for spending too much time on the ballistic data instead of just trusting my gut like the instructors say. He looked at the floor. They call me the computer, like it's an insult. Olivia felt something turn over in her chest because she knew exactly what that felt like. She'd been the calculator once in a unit full of men who thought the nickname was a joke. Private Dawson, she said, come here. He stepped closer. That grief you're getting, that nickname, she looked at him steadily. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Every hour of that data work is going into your hands. And one day in an afternoon, you can't predict it's going to come out of your hands as something that looks like instinct, but is actually 10,000 hours of caring too much. The people mocking you are going to be alive because of it, and they still won't understand what saved them. She paused. The computer, the calculator, they'll say it like it's a weakness. It's the opposite. It's the thing that's going to make you the one they call when it's impossible. Wear it like a medal. Dawson stared at her, and then something in his face changed, some knot that had been sitting in him for months coming loose all at once. Yes, ma'am, he said, and his voice was thick. Marcus did come sit in the back of her classroom eventually, exactly as he'd promised. He showed up unannounced one afternoon, older and grayer and grinning, and he sat in the last row while she taught, and afterward he found her. Well, she said, you made a kid in the second row look exactly the way you made me look, Marcus said. That specific look, the one where you realize you've been wrong about something for a long time and you're mad about it and grateful for it at the same time. He shook his head. You're good at this, Carter. You were always going to be good at this. You doubted me once. I did, loudly, in a truck, on a mountain. He smiled. And I've told that story to every young sniper who'll listen ever since. You know why? Because the point of the story isn't that you made impossible shots. Plenty of people make hard shots. The point is that I looked at the best sniper I'd ever served with, and I called her crazy for reading birds. The point is that I couldn't tell. And if I couldn't tell, then none of us can tell, and that means every quiet kid getting mocked in every unit might be the one who saves everyone someday. He looked at her. That's the story. You're the proof. The years went on. Olivia's afternoon on that mountain became a case study taught by people who'd never met her in classrooms she'd never see. The shot through the gap got analyzed by ballistics experts who could never quite make the numbers explain how a person did that in 2 seconds. And every explanation came up short in the same place, at the same word, the word she'd given the ballistics officer in the tent all those years ago. Ready. She'd been ready for something she couldn't predict, and no formula could capture how. But Olivia Carter never once described herself as a legend. When people used the word, she corrected them gently and firmly every time. I was a soldier who did her job on the afternoon it mattered, she'd say. That's all. There's no legend in it. There's just the hours, and anybody willing to put in the hours nobody sees can be ready when nobody else is. That's not a gift, that's a choice, Wayne. I made it 10,000 times before anybody was watching. Private Dawson graduated top of his class. Years later, on his own deployment in his own afternoon, he couldn't predict, he noticed something. Nobody else noticed a wrongness in a place everyone else called safe, and he was right, and people who never knew his name went home to their families. He never told anyone about it. He just carried it, the weight and the worth together, the way a woman who'd once been called the calculator had taught him to carry it. And on the day Colonel James Walker finally retired, 29 years in 3 wars, he stood up in front of a room full of soldiers and told the story of the morning. He laughed at a rookie for reading birds. He told it start to finish, and he ended it the way he ended every telling of it, with his voice steady and his eyes wet. I'm standing here, Walker said, because a 23-year-old I'd dismissed noticed that a bird wouldn't land on a window. I got to be a husband for all these years because of it. I got to walk both my daughters down the aisle. I got to become an old man who complains about his knees. Every good thing in the back half of my life I owe to a soldier who saw what nobody else could see and who never once asked to be remembered for it. He paused. So remember her anyway. Her name is Olivia Carter, and she taught me the truest thing I ever learned in uniform. Experience matters, God knows it matters, but vision, the willingness to see what everyone else looks past, and the hours to be ready when your afternoon comes, that changes everything. Olivia was in the audience that day. She hadn't wanted the attention, of course. She never did. But she'd come because Walker had asked her to, and because after all these years, she'd finally learned the thing he had told her in that tent, the impossible thing. She'd learned to hold both, the 10 and the 41, the weight and the worth. The quiet kid nobody believed in, and the woman a colonel credited with the whole back half of his life. When it was over, an old veteran came up to her, someone she didn't recognize, someone who had heard the story secondhand 100 times. You're her, Denadpar, he said. You're the one who read the birds. Olivia thought about correcting him, about all the ways the story had grown in the telling, about how it was never really about the birds or the shot or the record or any of the things people remembered. But she looked at the old man and she thought about all the quiet kids out there right now, getting mocked for caring too much, spending their lonely hours on the math nobody asked them to do, not knowing yet that those hours were building the thing that would one day let them save everyone. And she decided to let the story do its work. That's me, she said. But it was never about the birds. It was about the hours nobody sees. Tell it that way if you tell it. Tell them the secret was never one perfect moment. The secret was 10,000 hours in the dark being ready for a shot they couldn't predict for people who'd never know their name. The old man nodded slowly, and Olivia Carter walked out into the light, no longer the rookie nobody believed in, no longer even the legend everyone else insisted she was, but something better and simpler and truer than either. A soldier who was ready when it counted, who saved the lives she could, who carried the weight of the ones she took, and who spent the rest of her days teaching the next quiet kid that being underestimated is not a wound but a weapon, and that the greatest snipers are never remembered for how far they can shoot, but for the lives they quietly, invisibly, and forever protect. And that is the whole truth of Olivia Carter. Not the range, not the record, not the impossible shot through the gap. The lives, always and only the lives, but the years between that medal and that retirement speech were not quiet ones, and anyone who thinks Olivia Carter simply walked into a classroom and was welcomed has never worked inside an institution that has been doing something the same way for 50 years. The first real trouble came in her third month at the school, and it came from a man named Master Sergeant Ray Holloway. Holloway had been teaching at that school for 11 years. He had 4 deployments, a wall of certificates, and a philosophy he'd been preaching to every class that passed through his hands. He believed snipers were made by pressure, not by paper. He believed data was a crutch. And he had made it very clear in 100 small ways that he considered Sergeant First Class Carter a public relations hire. He said it out loud on a Tuesday in the instructor bay with 4 other cadres standing there. "I'll be straight with you, Carter." Holloway didn't look up from the rifle he was cleaning. "You had a good day, one good day, and the Army looked at that day and decided to build a curriculum around it. That's not how this works. This school doesn't run on somebody's lucky afternoon." Olivia set down her coffee. The room got very quiet the way rooms did when Holloway started in on someone. "You think it was luck," she said. "I think it was a hell of a day, and I think you're brave, and I don't take anything away from you." Holloway finally looked up. "But you're teaching these kids to sit and calculate, to read birds, to spend 4 hours on a wind study, and when they get downrange and everything's on fire, and there's no time to think they're going to reach for a notebook that isn't there." He shrugged. "I've buried men who overthought. I've never buried one who moved." The other instructors shifted uncomfortably, because Holloway wasn't stupid and he wasn't cruel, and the worst part was that everything he said sounded reasonable. "Can I ask you something?" Olivia said. "Go ahead." "How long does it take to get from thinking about a wind hold to knowing a wind hold?" Holloway paused. "That's not a real question." "It's the only question." She stepped closer. "You're right that in the moment there's no time to calculate. You're completely right. On that mountain, I had 2 seconds to hold a split wind at 900 meters through a gap I could see for the length of a breath. I didn't calculate anything. There wasn't time." She held his eyes. "But the reason I knew where to hold is that I'd spent 6 years calculating when there was time. All those hours you call a crutch, that's not what I used in the moment. That's what I built the moment out of. By the time it mattered, the math wasn't in a notebook. It was in my hands." "That's a nice speech." "It's not a speech, it's a mechanism," Olivia said. "You tell them to trust their gut. Fine. But where do you think a gut comes from? You think men are born with it. A gut is just experience that's been repeated so many times it's stopped needing words. You and I want the exact same thing. Ray, we want them to act without hesitating. We just disagree about where that comes from." She paused. "You think it comes from pressure. I think pressure only reveals what's already there. And what's already there is built in the boring hours nobody watches." Holloway said nothing for a long moment. Then he set down his cleaning rod. "You want to test that," he said. "Test it how? 2 teams, your students, my students, same problem set, unknown distance, dirty wind moving, target compressed timeline. No prep sheets, no data books, nothing but what's in their heads when they walk onto that line." His jaw set. "You say your way builds instinct. I say it builds paralysis. Let's find out." Every instructor in that bay stopped, pretending not to listen. Olivia thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Yes," she said, "but with one condition. We don't tell the students it's a competition between instructors." Not one word. Because the second they know they're carrying our egos, they stop shooting for themselves and start shooting for us, and then the whole thing measures nothing. Holloway blinked. He had not expected that. "Fine," he said slowly. "Nobody tells them. And Ray," Olivia picked her coffee back up, "if your students win, I'll say so publicly. In front of the cadre. I'll tell them I was wrong. And if yours do, then you sit in the back of my classroom for 1 hour," she said, "and you listen to the whole thing start to finish before you decide what it is." Holloway almost smiled. Deal. It was the second time in her life a man had said that word to her while being certain he'd win. The test ran 10 days later. 12 students, unknown distances between 6 and 900 meters. A crosswind that switched halfway down the range, exactly the kind of dirty air that makes a shooter feel like the world is lying to him. Each student got 60 seconds from the moment the target appeared. Holloway's students went first and they were good, fast, aggressive, decisive. They engaged quickly and they did not hesitate. They also missed, not all of them, but more than they should have, and they missed in a specific way that made Olivia's stomach twist because she recognized it instantly. They were holding for the wind they could feel at the firing line, the near wind, the one on their faces. And the far wind, the one down by the target, was doing something else entirely. "They're all missing the same direction," she said quietly to Holloway. "Every one of them." Holloway's face had gone tight. "I see it. They're not missing because they're bad. They're missing because nobody ever taught them that the wind at their cheek is a liar." Then her students shot. And what happened was not dramatic, which was somehow worse for Holloway. Her students were slower off the line, noticeably slower, 3 or 4 seconds slower, every one of them, and Olivia could feel Holloway wanting to say something about it. But those 3 or 4 seconds were not hesitation. They were reading. Every student's eyes went down, range to the mirage, to the dust, to the grass by the target, and then they built a hold and sent it. 10 of 12 hit on the first round. The other 2 hit on the second. Nobody cheered. Nobody knew it was a competition. The students packed up their gear and went to chow and never learned they just settled an 11-year argument. Holloway stood on that line for a long time after they'd gone. "They read the far wind," he finally said. "They read the far wind. I've been teaching 11 years, and I have never once told a student that the wind at the muzzle matters less than the wind at the target." Holloway's voice had gone hoarse. "I knew it. Somewhere I knew it. I just never taught it because I learned it downrange the hard way, and I assumed they would too." He turned and looked at her. "How many men have I sent out of this school half-finished, Carter?" And here is where Olivia Carter did the thing that made Ray Holloway her ally for the rest of his career. She did not gloat. She did not take a single inch of ground. "None," she said. "Don't. I mean it. Every one of your students got off the line 4 seconds faster than mine. 4 seconds. She looked at him levelly. "There will be days downrange where 4 seconds is the whole thing, where reading the far wind doesn't matter because the target is gone by the time you've read it. You've been teaching them a real thing, Ray. A thing I can't teach because I'm not fast. I've never been fast, and I know it." She paused. "Your students are quick, and mine are accurate. That's not one of us being right. That's 2 halves of a sniper standing in 2 different classrooms." Holloway stared at her. "You're saying we teach together. I'm saying if a kid walks out of here with your speed and my reading, he's better than either of us ever was." She shrugged. "I didn't come here to win an argument with you. I came here because a colonel told me there were kids getting mocked for caring too much, and they needed to see somebody who turned out to be right. You've got kids in your class who need what I've got. I've got kids in mine who need what you've got. That's the whole thing." For a long moment, Holloway didn't move. Then he stuck out his hand. "1 hour in the back of your classroom," he said, as agreed. He sat in the back for 1 hour. He came back the next day for another. Within a year, they were teaching the advanced block together, and Holloway would open it every single time by telling the students in his gravel voice that everything he was about to teach them about speed was worthless without everything Sergeant Carter was about to teach them about seeing. But the thing Olivia never expected, the thing that broke her open, came 4 years into her time at the school, and it came in an envelope. A letter forwarded through 3 offices, addressed in careful handwriting. She almost didn't open it. She got mail sometimes from people who had heard the story, and it always made her uncomfortable. But something about the handwriting stopped her. It was from a woman named Ellen Walker. Olivia sat down before she read it, and she was grateful afterward that she had. The letter did not thank her for the shot. It never mentioned a rifle at all. Ellen Walker wrote about a phone call she'd received one evening, years earlier, from a husband who sounded a little strange, a little quieter than usual, and who said nothing about his day, but stayed on the line longer than he ever had. She wrote that she hadn't understood it at the time. She wrote that she'd understood it later when he finally told her on the night before their older daughter's wedding, sitting in a hotel room in a rented tuxedo crying in a way she'd never seen him cry. He'd told her he almost wasn't there. He'd told her about a young sergeant who'd noticed a bird. And Ellen Walker wrote that she had spent every day since then knowing that her entire life, her marriage, her daughter's father, all of it had come down to whether one particular 23-year-old had been paying attention on one particular afternoon. The last line of the letter was the one Olivia could never read out loud, not once, not in 20 years of being asked to tell the story. Ellen wrote, "I don't know how to thank someone for a whole life, so I will just tell you that we have used it well." Olivia sat with that letter for a long time. She had refused the 41 names. She had told the major in that tent to keep them because if she knew who they were, she'd spend her life checking on them, and that wasn't her job. She had spent years believing that was the right call, the clean call, the professional one. And now here was one life she hadn't been able to refuse arriving in an envelope, insisting on being known. She called Marcus that night. "She wrote you," Marcus said. "Walker's wife wrote you. She wrote me." "What did she say?" Olivia opened her mouth and found she couldn't. Marcus waited, and when the silence stretched long enough, he understood. "Okay," he said gently. "You don't have to tell me." "Marcus," her voice was unsteady, "I've spent 4 years telling students that the best shots are the invisible ones, that you have to be okay saving people who will never know you did it, that the reward is that they get to go on with their lives and never think about you." She swallowed hard. "And I meant it. I still mean it. But I don't think I understood what it costs until somebody actually looked back at me." "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. "How do you carry it when they look back?" There was a long pause on the line. "You let it in," Marcus said. "That's all. You spent all this time being tough enough to not need the thank you. Turns out the harder thing is being soft enough to take it when it comes." He exhaled. "Take it, Carter. She wants you to have it. Don't you dare hand it back to her out of humility." She took it. She kept that letter in her desk for the rest of her career, and she never once showed it to a student, and it changed the way she taught anyway. Because after Ellen Walker's letter, when Olivia stood in front of a room and told them the shots that mattered were invisible, she started adding one more thing. "But sometimes they're not invisible," she'd say. "Sometimes years later, a life you saved reaches back for you, and when it does, you don't get to be humble about it. You let it land. Because if you can carry the weight of the ones you took, you'd better learn to carry the worth of the ones you saved. Both. Always both. A person who only carries the weight will break. And a person who only carries the worth was never really doing this job." Then came the day Private Dawson, no longer a private, called her from a place he wasn't supposed to say the name of. His voice was wrong. Flat in a way she recognized instantly because she'd sounded exactly like that walking down a mountain a lifetime ago. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to call. I didn't know who else." He stopped. "It was today, my afternoon, the one you told us about." Olivia sat down slowly. "Tell me." "I saw it." His voice cracked. "There was a spot everybody said was clear. Everybody. 3 teams walked past it, and something was wrong about it, and I couldn't say what, and I sat there for 2 hours like an idiot doing math nobody asked me to do, and then I saw it, and I was right, and I called it, and..." He stopped again. "Ma'am, if I'd been 10 seconds later, we'd have lost half a platoon. But you weren't." "No, ma'am. How many?" "6, ma'am." His breathing was uneven. "6 of them. I can't stop doing the math on it. 6 people. I keep thinking about Dawson." Her voice cut through calm and steady, the same voice that had once told a colonel to hold perfectly still. "Listen to me. Right now you're counting the 6. That's correct. That's right. A soldier who stops counting has lost something he needs." She paused. "But you don't get to only count the 6. You have to count the platoon. You have to count every one of those families. That's the deal. Carry all of it, or you're not carrying it honestly." Silence on the line, then a shaky breath. "That's what you meant," Dawson said. "In class. The weight and the worth. I wrote it down and I never understood it. I thought it was just a thing instructors say. Now you understand it. Ma'am, how do I..." His voice broke completely. "How do I do this?" And Olivia Carter, sitting at a desk with a letter from Ellen Walker in the drawer, gave him the same answer a colonel had once given her in a tent on the worst night of her life. "Nobody knows how," she said gently. "You just do it anyway. You get up tomorrow and you do it anyway. And you find people carrying the same weight and you don't carry it alone." She let that sit. "You called me. That means you already know how. That's the whole lesson, Dawson. That's the only part I ever really needed to teach you." He was quiet for a long time. They called me the computer, he said finally. The whole class, right up until today. And today my team leader shook my hand and said he'd never doubt me again. A wet, disbelieving laugh. Ma'am, he said it exactly like you said somebody did. Word for word. It was like you'd written it down for him. That's because it's always the same words, Olivia said, and she was smiling and her eyes were wet. Every time, in every unit, in every war, somebody laughs at the quiet one for caring too much, and then the afternoon comes, and then the words are always the same. That was the moment Olivia Carter finally understood what her life had actually been for. Not the shot, never the shot. The shot had saved one colonel and stopped one network and protected 41 people she'd refused to name. That was one afternoon. That was finite. But every quiet kid she'd taught to stop apologizing for the hours nobody sees, every calculator and computer and overthinker she'd told to wear the nickname like a medal, every one of them was going to have their own afternoon someday. And theirs would have afternoons after them. It went on and on forward past anything she'd ever get to see, an unbroken line of people who'd been underestimated. Learning that being underestimated was not a wound but a weapon. She had made one impossible shot in her life, but she had made hundreds of people ready. And ready, it turned out, was the only thing that had ever mattered. Ray Holloway retired first, and at his ceremony he told a room full of soldiers that the best thing he ever did in 11 years of teaching was lose a bet to a sergeant with one deployment. Marcus Reed retired next and told anyone who'd listen that he'd once looked at the finest sniper he ever served with and called her crazy for reading birds, and that the point of the story was that he couldn't tell, and if he couldn't tell, then nobody could, so you damn well better take the quiet ones seriously. And when it was finally Olivia's turn, decades in hair gone gray, at the temples, she stood in front of a room full of young soldiers who had grown up hearing her name as a case study and did not know what to do with the fact that she was an actual person. She did not talk about the range. She did not talk about the wind or the gap or the truck or the record. She talked about a colonel who laughed at her and a veteran who doubted her and a window that everyone else called empty. They were not bad men, she said. That's the part I need you to hear. Every person who underestimated me that day was experienced, competent, and trying to keep people alive. They weren't wrong to trust experience. They were only wrong to believe that experience is the same thing as seeing. She looked out over the room. Experience tells you what usually happens. Vision tells you what is happening. And on the day those two things disagree, the person who is willing to look, really look at the thing everyone else has already dismissed, is the only person in that valley who can save anybody. She paused. You will be underestimated, she said. Some of you already are. You'll be the quiet one, the careful one, the one who cares too much about details nobody else thinks matter. They'll give you a nickname and they'll mean it as a joke. Her voice didn't waver. Let them. Take the nickname. Do the hours. Because one day the afternoon comes that nobody predicted, and in that afternoon there is no time to become ready. There is only being ready or not being ready, and which one you are was decided years earlier alone in all the hours nobody ever saw. The room was completely silent. They will remember the shot, Olivia Carter said. They always remember the shot. But the shot was 2 seconds long, and I spent 6 years earning it. And every life I ever protected was protected by those 6 years, not by those 2 seconds. She let that stand. So here it is, the only thing I know for certain after all of this. Talent gets noticed. Experience gets respected. But preparation is the only thing that has ever saved anyone. And that is the truth of Olivia Carter, and it does not need one word more. Not the distance, not the record, not the impossible shot through the wind, the hours nobody saw and the lives they bought. That is what she was. That is what she taught. And that is what she left behind.